Guys, welcome to GED Science Level 1 practice test. So in all we have 4 practice tests. So level 4, most people find to be the most difficult. Level 1, most people find to be the easiest. The way that I would go about this is in the description. There are 20 questions for this practice test. And so I would go ahead and answer those first, then watch the video, see how you did, and get information about the most important concepts that are going to show up on the actual exam. From a score standpoint, so you need a 145 on each of the subject areas of the GED, right? So this one is science, right? But that also is language arts, math, and social studies. So 145, so what that really means is you should be shooting for somewhere around 65%, sort of like a bottom level score that you need to pass. Right now, if you have some interest in any kind of college type stuff, is you really want that more like 75 or 80%. That's where it will be the most useful for your applications. So that's really how you should be thinking about it. So given that most people think this one's a little bit easier, is you probably want a little better than the 65%. So that's just a reasonable way to think about it. Also, in the description below all the questions, we have links to videos that go into more detail on some of the areas, and it'll be obvious as you look at it which questions connect to which videos. And then finally, we do have a mobile app which has thousands of GED science questions, and I think it'd be very valuable. Check it out, free to install. Okay, let's get going here. So question 1, the change in heritable traits of a population over time is, where is my pen? There we go, can't do anything about this. Okay, the change in heritable traits of a population over time is referred to as, and the answer we want is B, natural selection. Okay, and so the term change in heritable traits of a population over time. So connecting that to natural selection is really important, right? So with natural selection, really you're looking at the reproduction of individuals due to differences in their phenotype. So the phenotype, it just means observable characteristics. It's a key mechanism of evolution, right? So natural selection and evolution, you need to be connecting those two together. Let's see, what else could I tell you? Right, we're basically saying here that certain traits are advantageous, and those that have the advantageous trait will reproduce more often. Therefore, future generations will have more individuals with that trait. That's what natural selection is saying. Okay. Question 2. Selective breeding for specific phenotypic traits is called, and the answer we want there is artificial selection. All right, so we just talked about natural selection for a second. Right, and again, the key here is that it's selective breeding. Right. So this is a process by which humans use animal breeding and plant breeding to selectively develop particular phenotypic traits or characteristics by choosing which animal or plant males and females will sexually reproduce and have offspring together. We just talked about it, but again, natural selection is the likelihood of certain traits to show up more in a population due to differences in their phenotype. And again, phenotype is observable characteristics. Okay, variation in specific offspring can be caused by each of the following, except, and the answer here we want is genetic drift. Okay, so we're saying that variation in offspring can be caused by each of genetic recombination, mutations, and the environment, but not genetic drift. Parental DNA is recombined using the process of meiosis. Mutations can add novel genes to a population, and the environment can shape the expression of genes. However, Genetic drift is the change in frequency of an existing gene variant or an allele in a population due to random sampling of organisms. Question 4. Common ancestry between organisms of different species arise during, and they kind of almost gave the answer away just with a question. It's the answer we want is speciation, right? You see that term, different species. So with speciation, new species are established from a single ancestral population. Organisms which share a more recent common ancestor are more closely related. Q5. What are 3 requirements for evolution by natural selection? So again, we go back to this natural selection, right? And so if you're kind of thinking like, what are the most important concepts? Like already 2 of the first 5 are natural selection. So making sure that you really have the concept of natural selection down in your mind will help a lot. Like it's going to come up at least once, if not twice, on the test. Okay, so the answer we want is variation, heritability, and competition. That is answer choice A. These are the 3 requirements. You have to have these memorized, right, in your mind. That this is a very, very common question right here. So in order for natural selection to occur, there must be variation in traits, which means individuals within a population have different characteristics or traits, heritability of that variation, offspring inherits traits from their parents, right? That's what that means. And offspring does not receive the same traits as either parent, but rather a mixture of both parents' traits. And finally, competition, which means more offspring are produced than can survive. So offspring with traits better matched to the environment will survive and reproduce more effectively than others. Okay, so those are the big 3. Really, like, it's great if you know what it means, right? But really, those are these 3 words right here: variation, heritability, competition, right? You just got to lock those into your mind as far as those are the 3 requirements for evolution. The question may show up in different forms, right? But in one way or another, this question almost for sure is going to show up. So I would be highlighting that one in my mind. Who developed the theory of evolution? Okay, so we want to know that Darwin is considered the father of evolution. Darwin established that all species of life have descended over time from common ancestors. Darwin also stated that evolution resulted from a process that he called natural selection. There we go again, that word, or 2 words, natural selection. That is the work of Darwin. Okay, highest level of organization. The highest level of organization is the biosphere. Okay, so if we're not familiar with these terms, let's just go over them here real quickly. So the biosphere is the global ecological system integrating all living beings, including their interaction with the elements of the lithosphere, geosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere. An ecosystem is a community of living organisms in conjunction with the non-living components of their environment. A community is a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common, and a population is all the inhabitants of a particular town, area, or country. Okay, so as you kind of go through those, right, remembering for biosphere, like, so I said more than you actually have to know. I've just given you some details and some background. Really, the part that you want to have in your mind: highest level of organization, biosphere. Okay, if we have that, then we're pretty good. The next thing, right, that ecosystem is living organisms in conjunction with non-living components, right? If you know that, then we know ecosystem. Those are the 2 most common things that you would be asked about. Question number 8. Photosynthesizing organisms are, right? So then we need to know about producers, consumers, and decomposers. Answer choice A is what we want. So producers are any kind of green plant. Green plants make their own food by taking sunlight and using the energy to make sugar. Consumers, on the other hand, have to feed on producers or other consumers to survive. And then decomposers take all the dead animals and plants and break them down into their nutrient components so that plants can use them to make more food. So that's kind of like our basic difference between producers, consumers, decomposers. And certainly, like with almost all these questions, we can get more detailed. We just really want, it may seem complicated at first if you're struggling with some of this stuff, but really it's just like a basic 1 or 2 sentence answer about all of these concepts. And if you have that, you're good to go for the test, right? We don't need to know more details about producers. 4 elements that cycle through ecosystems, from the living to the non-living components and back again. Which of these is not one of those elements? So it's saying that 3 of the 4 are. The element that does not do that is hydrogen. Okay, so we have the 4 elements: carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and water. Carbon and oxygen cycle through the atmosphere due to photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Nitrogen cycles through land, air, and organisms just due to its chemical nature. Water cycles through oceans, land, air, and organisms through evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and transpiration from plants. Okay. So, right, we had hydrogen there, and really we should have had carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, water, right? So this, rather than hydrogen, should have been water, right? All right, question 10. The organisms in an ecosystem that capture the sun's electromagnetic energy and convert it into chemical energy are called, right? So again, we have these producers, consumers type question, right? So you might, again, like, so our first one was natural selection, right? That, well, we have having some other questions here, that natural selection was a big one, and then it's been referenced in 2 or maybe even 3 questions in one way or another. And then again, we have these producers and consumers type questions. Okay, so producers make the carbon-based molecules, which are usually carbohydrates, that the rest of the organisms in the ecosystems, including you and me, consume. Producers include all of the green plants and some bacteria and algae. Okay, so really we're kind of restating what we said a couple questions ago, right? But we need to know that about the producers. Okay, we're halfway there, guys. What type of symbiosis exists in which one species benefits at the expense of the other? We want answer B, so let's go over this a little bit. So, so they ask about symbiosis, and that could throw us off right from the beginning, right? Symbiosis is any type of a close and long-term biological interaction between 2 different biological organisms. Mutualism, parasitism, and commensalism are all types of symbiosis. So let's go over each of these here real briefly. Mutualism involves 2 organisms of different species existing in a relationship in which each individual benefits from the activity of the other. Parasitism is a non-mutual relationship between species where one species, which is the parasite, benefits at the expense of the other, the host, right? And so hopefully we can have that idea of differences there between mutualism and parasitism. Commensalism in ecology is a class of relationships between 2 organisms where one organism benefits from the other without affecting it. Okay, so as you look at these, and if that stuff is hard to remember, right? Mutualism, you just look at mutual, right? So like another phrase, like in business, is like mutually beneficial. Maybe you've heard that, right? And that means it's good for both of us, right? Mutually beneficial means we're each getting something that we want. Okay, it could go beyond business, could be in any kind of relationship. And so thinking when you see that mutualism, when you see mutual there, thinking that means good for both of us. If you can know that and just know that parasitism is the opposite, you're in good shape. The maximum population size of the species that the environment can sustain indefinitely, given the food, habitat, water, and other necessities available in the environment, is called carrying capacity. Okay, so let's go over that. Carrying capacity, that's the number of individuals an environment can support without significant negative impacts to the given organism and its environment. Below carrying capacity, populations typically increase, while above, they typically decrease. Okay? So the key point there, though, it's just the number of individuals an environment can support without significant negative impacts. That's carrying capacity. Okay, natural gas. Um, and this may show up in more than one question over the 4 practice tests, right? So what is natural gas? Is it renewable? No. Is it a fossil fuel? Yes. Is it an alternative form of energy? No. Is it all of the above? No. Okay, so we want fossil fuel, right? Right. Natural gas is a fossil fuel. It's used as a source of energy for heating, cooking, and electricity generation, right? And so what I mean when is like being familiar with what's a fossil fuel, what's a renewable source of energy, what's the downside of fossil fuels, what's the upside, right? The advantage of fossil fuels, and we may even get to this uh, in this test, but we'll go ahead and talk about it now. Right, the advantage of fossil fuels is cost. Disadvantage, bad for the environment in most cases, and not sustainable. Like you can't just replenish it forever. So that's usually like the basic breakdown. Okay, ozone layer depletion. We've all heard of that. What does it mean? Has an impact on which of these? Global warming, skin cancer, availability of fossil fuels, global warming, and skin cancer. Okay, and that is actually the answer. Answer D. Let's go over this for a sec. Atmospheric ozone has 2 effects on the temperature balance of the Earth. It absorbs solar ultraviolet radiation, which heats the stratosphere. It also absorbs infrared radiation emitted by the Earth's surface, effectively trapping heat in the troposphere. What this means really is that it can either heat or cool the Earth. Depletion of the ozone layer also has consequences on humans, animals, and plants. This typically results from higher UV levels reaching us on Earth. Research does confirm that high levels of UV rays cause non-melanoma skin cancer. The major cause of soil erosion in rainforests is deforestation. Deforestation is the clearing of trees and other vegetation, transforming a forest into cleared land. Deforestation increases greenhouse gas emissions, disrupts the water cycle, increases soil erosion, and decreases the natural beauty of an area. So all those we want to be familiar with for deforestation. In this case, it was soil erosion, right? Another ozone layer question. So again, like they're not just these questions. Some concepts are not just like repeating for no reason. So we have another ozone layer question, right? So that should highlight in our mind, we really got to be familiar with some of the basics about ozone layer. Okay, so the hole in the ozone layer does what? And the answer we were looking for is B, reduces the greenhouse effect. So what does that mean? So the hole in the ozone layer in the Earth's upper atmosphere, the stratosphere, reduces the greenhouse effect because ozone is a greenhouse gas. Okay, so that's your first concept. If you're not familiar with that, ozone is a greenhouse gas. However, ozone in the stratosphere filters out ultraviolet radiation from the sun that is harmful to life on Earth. Therefore, the hole in the ozone layer allows those harmful rays to reach us on Earth. Chlorofluorocarbons being released into the stratosphere leads to ozone layer depletion, but is not a result of the hole in the ozone layer, if that answer was tempting for you. Okay, so this could be, and probably is, both a social studies and a science question. What historical event had the greatest impact on air pollution? We want to know that's the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so, and that really has to do with the emergence of factories, which is a big part of the Industrial Revolution, and consumption of immense quantities of coal. This gave rise to unprecedented air pollution. The large volume of industrial chemical discharges added to the growing load of untreated human waste. Okay, so the Industrial Revolution, air pollution. We want to be able to connect the dots on those two. Okay, so I think I referenced this a few questions ago, right? And then here it shows up again. Another fossil fuels question. What is an attraction of fossil fuels? And so I already kind of gave this answer away, but hopefully you already answered all these questions anyway. What is an attraction of fossil fuels? That one is going to be cost. Okay, so that one we really want to have down. It's not too hard to remember. It should make sense in your mind. Attraction of fossil fuels is that they're relatively cheap and they're also readily available. The problem with them, they're not renewable, cause pollution. Okay, so that's kind of just the basic concepts of fossil fuels that we want to know. It's a really common question. And then we have what leads to ozone layer depletion, right? Let's see what we have here. Right, and again, another ozone layers thing. So a lot of these concepts do tend to show up more than once. And if they show up more than once, it's because, our subject matter experts who have looked at a ton of GED science exams have just seen like certain types of questions show up a lot. So because of that, we try to reinforce it in these tests. Anyway, what leads to ozone layer depletion? Is it when chlorofluorocarbons are released into the atmosphere? Yes, that's true. Is it a steady decline of about 4% in the total amount of ozone in Earth's stratosphere, the ozone layer? Yes, that's true. And just as a side note, when in an answer choice, when they give you this much detail, a steady decline about 4% in the total amount of ozone, it's pretty likely that that's going to be true. They're not likely to give you that much detail just to throw you off. Okay, and then answer choice C, springtime decrease in stratospheric ozone around Earth's polar regions, the ozone hole, like that one too. All of these are good answers. Ozone depletion, and we're kind of repeating ourselves, but it's important. A lot of times you'll have to hear this a few times. Ozone depletion occurs when chlorofluorocarbons are released into the atmosphere. These gases, through several chemical reactions, cause the ozone molecules to break down, reducing ozone's ultraviolet radiation absorbing capacity. Ozone depletion describes two distinct but related phenomena: a steady decline of about 4% in the total amount of ozone in the Earth's stratosphere, which is the ozone layer, and a much larger decrease in stratospheric ozone around Earth's polar regions. Okay, so it might sound like a lot, but you do want to be familiar with this stuff. Okay, and then yet another ozone layer depletion answer choice, right? Increasing concentrations of greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, are an indication of which of these? That guy. Global warming and climate change, these are terms for the observed century scale rise in average temperature of the Earth's climate system and its related effects. Global warming is mostly being caused by human activities, mainly increasing concentrations of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, CO2. Okay, so that gets us to the end of the level 1 exam. So hopefully this video was useful for you. If if you did great on it and you thought it was easy, awesome. Move on to the next one. If you struggled with it and you're not at that 65 or 70% range even, one of the biggest things that I would suggest, one is, so if there's a bunch of stuff where you're like, either you haven't heard it in a long time or perhaps you just were never familiar with some of the concepts we went over, that's fine, is we have videos that go into quite a bit more detail in explaining the stuff. And so I would take a look at those. And so that you're kind of building up your knowledge base. That's kind of step one. And step two is you really have to get into the practice of answering a lot of questions, right? Because a lot of times we can watch a video and think we understand something, and then we get the question, and then we realize, well, we're not quite as sure as we thought we were. So we'd rather experience that in practice than on the actual test. So that's what the app is for, right? The app will go into lots of little mini topics, ask you a bunch of questions. You'll get feedback every single time you answer. As you're answering questions, the app will learn about you. We'll learn where you're weak and where you're strong, and then we'll have these recommended videos. So it'll be telling you which videos to watch rather than you trying to figure it out for yourself, which can be kind of useful. So anyway, that's what I would recommend doing. The link to the app is right on the top of the description before the questions. So I hope this helped, and see you again on another video. Last thing, if you have questions or comments on things that just didn't make sense to you, I just send us a comment. We'll respond and try to provide information so that it helps to clear it up. All right, thanks guys.